Morning, Blackburn George. The morning after losing to Crystal Palace. How are you, my friend?
I'm all right.
Good to see that, and I hope that the fans of Positively Uncensored podcasts are as all right as you are, especially after last night's setback. Welcome to this podcast, uh, George. You know, the in our prior broadcast, we said that basically there was an opportunity here for Arsenal coming up. We did this before the weekend unfolded. Chelsea lost, Manchester United drew, the Scum beat Newcastle 5-1. 5 or 4-1, guys. I think it's 5-1. And we were all locked in on 54 points. But we suffered this loss to Crystal Palace. Shocked or surprised?
The manner of the defeat was a shock. I mean, you can lose any game, and Palace played well, but the manner of the defeat was frightening. I mean,
Really?
with Spurs winning 5-1 and playing very well, and us losing 3-0 and playing very badly, there's a tsunami of panic set into the Arsenal fan base.
You think you're sensing panic, George?
We're absolutely engulfed by it. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's people are absolutely panic stricken. But a little bit of perspective, we've won 5 away games on the trot.
Yes.
And we lost the game and we played badly. Spurs played well, but Newcastle played badly. I mean, their defending was as bad as ours. So, a bit of perspective, we're still in a decent position. It's all going to come down to the Spurs game now, by the looks of it. And we'll see how we go. But last night, I mean, there's no logical explanation for why we were that bad. Thomas Partey had the worst performance I've seen. I'm not exaggerating. I didn't want to tweet this last night because I thought, well, it's reactionary, over the top, Don't jump in with both feet like everybody else is. Think about it.
Before you get a red card. Before you get a red card. 2 foot.
Yeah. I thought about it overnight,
Yeah.
and I thought, and seriously, I cannot remember a worse performance by a centre midfield player for Arsenal in the last 25 years. It was absolutely shocking. And it's worrying because he panicked. He was panic stricken. He was like a rabbit in the headlights. He didn't know what to do. He was pumping the ball away. He was passing it to the opposition players, the simplest of passes. And I think.
And then when he lost the ball, George, then when he lost the ball, he fouled.
Yeah, I can accept him losing the ball because he was injured at that point.
No. During the game, while he was active.
Oh,
whenever he lost the ball, he fouled. That was pretty much it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and he fouled in some terrible positions as well.
Yes, that is what is it called.
Away free kick. And that's panic, Shotta. I mean, it is. And that's not something that you overcome. If that's in your nature, if it's fight or flight and you're a flight man, and he appears very much to be a flight man,
yes.
You ain't training that out of him. And I think what's more worrying is he's been playing okay. I mean, for 18 months he was pretty dire, and for a couple of months he's been okay. And he has, can't be revisionist and say he hasn't played well. But I think Arteta saw his flaw and moved him back a little bit, moved Xhaka forward a little bit, because Xhaka takes the pressure better than Partey, which gave Partey a little bit more time on the ball. But Vieira has also seen that, and he's put Gallagher right on him.
Yes.
So he wasn't getting that extra time and space on the ball, and he was panicked, and he didn't cope well at all. And I don't care what anybody says. If you're telling me he's world class, you're an idiot. You know,
well,
it can be decent if you give him time, but world class, no. Limited player.
What Saha Will Saha said in the post game. I don't know if you saw that in the post game presser because he did it for Palace, and he said they pressed us up the middle, and they spent a week practicing because they knew that we wanted to play through the middle, and so Gallagher and Kuyate and even the boy Schlupp, who used to be at Leicester, who used to be a wide player at Leicester, he pushed him inside. Surprised me. And as you said, George, Partey couldn't cope. He was being pushed back, and all his bad habits came back.
He couldn't cope, and unfortunately, neither could Odegaard.
That was I was going to mention him as well, because
he had. I mean, he didn't look that bad because I was too busy laughing at Partey to notice Odegaard, but he had a bad game as well. Xhaka was okay as ever, but he can't do everything on his own. He was only okay because he had nobody to play with. You know, he couldn't create anything or do anything because the others were letting everybody down. But he was, as far as I can see, the only two players that came out of it that played okay. And you're never going to be playing brilliant in a team display like that. That played okay was Xhaka and Cedric.
George, that's a surprising comment by you, because the good and the great in Arsenal are down. Oh no, Cedric. I'm sorry. I'm kind of going to partially disagree with you. Will Zaha gave Cedric fits.
Yeah, he did, but he coped with it. I thought he coped with it.
Yes.
You know, he did give him a hard time, but he'll give anybody a hard time.
Oh, yes.
Including
Cedric coped with it. Sorry, go ahead.
Cedric coped with it. You know, he was on him, right on him, sometimes too on him, but
too tight.
No, I thought Cedric did, and he did well going forward, and he looked to attack when he could, and I thought he had a decent game, and Xhaka had a decent game, and the rest were subpar. I
was gonna interrupt you. Well, at least Cedric did not get into any contretemps with Zaha, and unlike Xhaka, who eventually had to foul him in the second half and take a big old yellow card. And I saw it coming when he was playing left back in the three at the back role. We'll talk about that in a second. But George, the thing you spoke about the good players, but talking about overreacting, our good friend Lee Dixon, who I have a thing for, is quoted that the three at the back, three or four defenders were absolutely shocking. Tavares, Ben White, and Gabriel. Now, Mr. Lee Dixon has a way of overreacting, and I think that's why he'll stop doing Arsenal matches, at least on my American feed. But what do you think of that opinion by Lee?
Well, he was right. They did. Tavares, he got a lot of the blame. In fact, but for both the goals, him and Gabriel were at fault. But they weren't equally at fault.
Yes.
Gabriel was 90% at fault.
For goal number two. For goal number two.
And goal number one.
Goal number one. Sailed over his head. He didn't judge the header right.
No, he didn't judge the header. He didn't.
Tavares was pushed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So very minimal blame for Tavares on that goal.
Yes.
And the second goal, inexperience showed because he didn't go. He assumed that Gabriel was going to cut the ball out, and he didn't go with the runner.
Right.
It was Ayew.
Right.
And so that was a mistake, but his assumption should have been right. Gabriel should have cut it out, and he didn't.
George, let's be.
But Gabriel's a golden boy at the moment, isn't he?
Right, and
so
he was making.
You can't criticize him.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you, George. Go ahead.
You can't criticize Gabriel at the moment because him, Tierney, Smith Rowe, Saka, they're golden boys at the moment, and you've got to find one of the scapegoats to blame rather than one of the golden boys. And we saw it last night. Smith Rowe and Saka were ineffective, poor by any standard, particularly by their own standards. Lacazette was a nightmare. Odegaard, as we've said, he had a bit of a mare. Partey was just beyond ridiculously bad. Gabriel, shocking. Ben White, he wasn't good. Tavares, he wasn't very good either. So there you go. Then I've been through them all, and we're down to what I said. Cedric and Xhaka were okay. The rest were fairly crap. Now, one thing that I can't personally do is blame Mikel Arteta for that. I'm happy to blame Arteta for any mistakes he makes. But that was the best 11 he could put on the field. And it was a system that's been doing well. We've been winning away from home. But when you've sold it, he's not told them all to panic and have no composure on the ball. You can't blame Mikel Arteta for that. What mistakes did he make last night? I'm not sure that he made any.
But George, well, first of all, before I even pose the question, we should recognize that Arsenal had overall 67% possession, far more passes. And George, it was marginally less in the first half, 50-something% possession, George. And then went to 80, and then went to not close to 80%, according to SOFA score, in the second half, right?
We were allowed that possession, though.
Go ahead.
We were allowed that possession.
Oh, yeah, especially in the second half, and Vieira admitted it. So one of the first lessons I learned from this is that possession can be a very deceptive statistic, right? But we could not, to me, we just making those two changes from normal, we were not very comfortable even in possession. Am I? And I would want to hear what the audience has to say.
Sure. But the possession was being lost between the two centre-backs and the three midfielders.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones that couldn't keep possession in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones that looked uncomfortable. Cedric wasn't a problem, as I've said.
Mm-hmm.
Tavares, the problem was not in possession of the ball. His defending's a bit suspect.
It was always suspect, George. Even when he was at Benfica, I mean, when he played us in the Europa League game, it was his attacking that attracted us. He was always suspect defensively.
Yeah.
The problem I wanted to bring up, George, as a lesson, we said it before, and with Ehab, we have like a perfect first 11. But once you deviate and you start bringing in Tavares, and you start digging deep And I think Lakongo had a decent little spell, right? But we don't seem to be that team after you go beyond that first 11 or 12 good players.
No, well, we know that, but I don't think there was enough missing for that drop off that we saw last night. You know, that's an easy way out, isn't it? To say, oh, we shot a couple of players, so we dropped off. Bloody left back and right back, or right back it was only that was missing, basically.
Tommy.
Doesn't mean that. Well, no, Tierney, sorry, left back.
Left back.
It doesn't mean that suddenly Partey and Odegaard can't keep the ball and panic. That's not an excuse for them, is it? It's not an excuse for Lacazette being completely useless. It's not an excuse for Smith Rowe and Saka not getting on the ball. And no, I think that's too easy. I mean, I just think they collectively panicked. They couldn't cope with the press, and they should have been able to cope with it because we've been coping with it for the last few weeks. Palace pressed us hard, but don't fucking think for a moment that this was the first time teams have tried that with us.
Well,
teams have been trying it for months.
But you know, George, I was surprised by the Palace press and mostly surprised by the fellow Mateta, the one who scored the first goal, because I didn't really know of his significance. But he was pressing Ramsdale right up, and to be honest, George, we were hurried. We were almost on the verge of panicking, and then Zaha was pushing back Cedric, getting into Ben White, and Ben White was not comfortable. So I think that press shocked us, and I think that's a lesson to be learned. We need to be able to address that press because other teams are going to learn from that.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, other people are going to try it. But my point is, this isn't the first time it's happened. You know, we didn't cope with it last night, but we've coped with it better in the last 2 months. We have. And I don't know why we couldn't cope with it last night, but I suspect, and you might be right here, other teams might try it, I suspect it was because Vieira pushed Gallagher right on to Partey. It was a more intense press on Partey than he's had to cope with since we moved him from the middle of the park. But maybe that's me looking at it simplistically as well. Maybe it's just we had a bad night. But I don't... You know my feelings on Arteta personally, but I just can't find a way to blame him for last night.
You're in effect saying it was just a bad day at the office?
I'm saying it might have been just a bad day at the office. And given that we've had quite a few good days at the office using the same players and the same system, let's not chuck the baby out with the bathwater.
What would you say if I said we have bad habits are back? Was there any bad habit that you saw that returned? Because we have been watching this team progress, and there were some bad habits prior to December. I use December. You know that I use December as my cutoff.
Well,
are you concerned that any bad habits are back? Let's put it that way.
Well, you'd have to be more specific, Shotta.
Well, obviously, I don't want to, and this is just picking on Partey, but he not showing composure.
So maybe his bad habits are back, but that's not the team's bad habits, is it? I just think it's inexplicable how he could have been that bad last night.
I would like to hear the audience.
It really is. It's just beyond me.
And I don't know if the audience agrees or disagrees with it, but I hope people make some comments on this. George, what about on the positive side? Because we discussed this in this podcast before. What about Arteta's changing the shape, changing tactics? First thing he did in the first half was take off Tavares, put on Martinelli. Then halfway through the second half, went to 3 at the back. Bought on Nketiah for Lacazette. And by the way, George, Nketiah was not some chop liver. He did very well. What do you thought of Arteta's tactical changes and his substitutions?
Well, I thought he did what he could,
Mm-hmm.
but it's difficult. If he feels Tavares has to come off, who does he put in his place? You put Xhaka in his place and go to a 3. So you've got Xhaka in that sort of hybrid left back, centre back position that he played in before, and I just think that's him wasted. But what's his alternative?
None.
You know, it might be the lesser of two evils, or the least bad move he could make. I think it's difficult because he hasn't got the cover. We don't have the cover, and I don't like Xhaka playing in defence at all. I mean, so I'd like to criticise it, but what else can he do? He's got to try and make a change because we're absolutely awful in the first half. We were better in the second half, probably because Palace sat back more and allowed us more of the ball. We actually looked better rather than being better. But it could easily have been different as well. I know people look for excuses and reasons and grasp onto any straw that they can. But at 2-0, Saka was fouled in the box. That was a penalty.
You mean, yes, because if Will Zaha got that, then Saka should have gotten his.
Absolutely.
They were like, you know.
So that would have been 2-1 and we're well on top. And they're sitting back. It's a completely different game. It was a penalty shotter. And if you don't get given them, it changes the game. Now, you shouldn't necessarily be reliant on penalties, but that should have been a penalty. We hit the bar. Was it?
The fellow, Nketiah.
Nketiah hit the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Smith Rowe should have scored.
He had 2 good shots on target.
2 good, straight at
Vince Guaita.
Yeah. And Odegaard really should have scored as well, although the ball was slightly behind him. But he could quite easily scored. We could have scored, should have scored, and definitely should have had a penalty. Now, it all adds up on top of the horrendous first half to look like we were absolutely useless. But were we really that bad?
Not at all, George. Not at all. 81 or 83% possession. I don't have the stats, but it's 80+% possession overall. I mean, I'm sorry. 60
in the second
something.
Half.
Yeah, 80 something in the second half. Right?
So
it was, and far more, passes and possession. The only difference is that they had more shots on target. Now, you have to give them credit for that.
Yeah, but like I said, we should have had a penalty. We could have easily scored 2 or 3 goals, and it changes the game. It's not people, and I don't want to be one of those people that look at the scoreline and say that's a reflection of the game. I think a good hiding was a reflection of the first half.
Yes,
I think that's fair enough.
True.
But I think we did do something about it, despite the fact that nobody actually played well. As a team, they started playing better. And we just got to hope that we come out firing against, is it Brighton next?
Yes, Brighton next. And they're not up. Well, my only fear is that they'll adopt some of the tactics, and be more confident about it, because their problem, I think part of it is lack of confidence and they don't score goals. That is good for us because if you don't score goals, we can score goals, and that is the problem. Brighton doesn't score enough goals. That's a full stop. George, um, I gonna throw to you. I think I mentioned this before, but one of the narratives that should be might have been destroyed. I don't think it is, but Nketiah uh, came on and he was far more effective than Lacazette. And I'm not joining the Lacazette out brigade, but Nketiah is not chopped liver. He squared
Yeah,
the
but
ball. He got it right. Yes.
bear in mind, Shotta,
Yes.
when Nketiah came on,
Mhm.
we were camped in their half. We had all the possession,
Yes.
and we were like the attacking team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lacazette is in the first half. It was more even. It was 50-50 or 53-47 actually, but
Yes.
it was close. And he's dropping into midfield, doing as he's told. He just had a shocking game. So I'm not sure if you parachuted Eddie in for Lacazette
You would.
to play as Lacazette played in the first half, sitting deeper, I'm not sure he would have been much more effective. But he might have been. I mean, he's certainly quicker, and he
Yes.
certainly looks more dangerous in front of goal. But he'll be gone this summer anyway. So
Yeah, he was like he's being
that's
put in
not
the
a
shop
worry.
window.
Not a worry, is it?
George. So lesson number one from you is that we had a bad day at the office. Lesson number two is that we are not as bad as everybody is saying. Right?
And lesson number three is we're not as good as everybody thought we were last week.
And but this is all shaping up. George, to be a battle royal with the Spurs. I mean, I don't think that the Premier League and the broadcasters could be any happier after what happened over the weekend. Don't you think?
No, I think that's true. And not only that, at least it gives us something to be interested in.
Yes.
Rather than wondering how we're going to finish in the bottom half or sneak into 8th place on the last day of the season.
Yes.
I'd rather be worrying about sneaking into 4th place than sneaking into 8th. So
true.
It's definitely better.
Yes.
And it gives us something to keep our interest going.
Yes, and I had sense of complacency actually online going into Crystal Palace. I think it was a big wake up call, by the way. Not for you.
Yeah, but there's still very much two camps, isn't there?
Yeah, well, yeah. The extremes and the extremes on YouTube's Twitter. That's what wins. And you and I spoke a lot about not avoiding the extremes. So it's Brighton on Saturday, I think, and then a huge battle with Liverpool and City on Sunday. But we just have to get back on track, George. We need to just simply get back on the horse. Isn't that what the lesson is? Don't get carried away with the loss to Crystal Palace. After all, they are London rivals. They were all pumped up for the game last night. You could just see it in the stadium.
The worry is that our confidence is shot, and that there might be a hangover against Brighton.
But we have been through these top 4 battles before. Nobody wants to remember a certain coach, and the whole idea is to keep the team together, keep them focused, because you will have 1 or 2 setbacks on the way, and I think that we as fans need to keep our emotions in check.
I think Mikel Arteta said something very apt last night. He said, "Everybody's on the boat with you when you're winning.
Right.
Let's see how many are on that boat now that we've had a hard night. That's the test.
That's a test.
And he's perfectly correct.
Right.
Everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet when we're winning. Let's see how they all knuckle down and stay on the boat and rowing in the right direction, in the same direction on Saturday or whenever it is we play
I think
again.
it's Saturday, George. I think it's Saturday, but don't quote me on that. But we're gonna have a show on Friday with Ehab. I would hope to get his perspective as a a former professional in the business, because a lot of people have no experience. Well, a lot of people who make a lot of comments, they don't have any professional experience. I'm not gonna say that they don't know their football, but that's my take on Ehab. Anyway, guys, we're not gonna drag this out. We think uh, the whole aim of this podcast was to draw some lessons from the loss. I don't think it's the end of the world. We have one game in hand. Don't forget. But I think it will be a battle royale, especially the Spurs up to the Spurs game, and we just need to hold our nerves, shouldn't we, George?
Yeah, at least it's interesting. At least we've got something to play for, rather than, like I say, being sat in 11th place 90% of the season and sneaking into 8th on the last day of the season, like we did last year. I mean, we were one loss away from being in the bottom half. If we hadn't won that last game last season, we were in the bottom half of the league, in the bottom half of the table. Literally, it was that close. One game took us from 11th to 8th.
Yes.
This is a lot better. This is progress.
It is, and we can't deny that. Well, George, we have all fans, few as they may be, but if you get a chance, guys, like to hear your comments. What are your, what lessons you draw from this Crystal Palace game? Do you agree with me and George? Do you tell us? We'd like you to, even if you disagree with us, we'll learn from that. So post your comments and like and subscribe. Until we meet again on Friday, George, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody, as well. And it's over and out.